Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. My name is Rich Mayfield, member 1211. I'm your host this evening. Welcome back. Exciting news. We're going to open real soon. Not sure when, but we started this whole process over a year ago, and I think the Adventurers Club is getting ready to open its doors again to live programs here. Tonight, we are here with Don Muchow, and Don, you are on an adventure right now, right?
That is correct.
And tell us where you are and what you're up to. You're literally in the field as we speak, right?
Yes, we finished the days running about 34 miles in Kilmichael, Mississippi. We've been in the state for 3 days, and it looks like we'll be out of it in another couple. Or actually staying the night in Starkville because lodging in this area is a little bit of a challenge.
So you just ran 34 miles today in Mississippi, and you're able to jump on this Zoom call with us and do an interview. That's pretty amazing. Is 34 mile? Is that a normal day for you? Is that what you do day in and day out?
That's pretty average. That's pretty average for me. Yeah.
So
generally we try to run from sun up to sundown. We have a rule we kind of made up that we don't get out of bed any earlier than 5 a.m. because we end up paying for it later in the day. That generally means 10 to 11 hours of running each day.
So let's back it up. What are you up to? Because 34 miles a day every day. What's your goal? Like what are you out there doing?
In terms of total miles so far, you mean?
No. Like why are you running every day?
Broadly speaking, we want to get across as fast as we can. I've learned on some previous runs last year, ran across Texas. I actually found out by accident that I had set a record for the fastest run across Texas. But we learned during the Texas run that I needed to take a rest day about every 10 days or 250 miles, whichever comes first. And so we just restarted the run in Texarkana after a couple of COVID pauses. And yesterday was a rest day, and today was the first active day back on the road through the rest of Mississippi.
So you're running across the USA, right? This is
yes.
we've got this graphic that you sent us here. This is your trip. You're going from Disneyland to Disneyworld?
That is correct. There's an online community of people who are planning to or have run across the U.S. that I'm trying to think how I want to put this. Basically said you need to stick on an extra 50 miles and put one toe in each ocean if you want this to be considered a transcontinental run. So we started in Newport Beach, which is 13 miles from Disneyland, and plan to finish in Melbourne, Florida, which is about 50 miles southeast of Disney World.
Now, is that the shortest run that you can dip a toe in two oceans, or is there like some?
It's close. We considered several things in terms of how to make the route short. One was what was the shortest safe route, because there are definitely some dangerous routes that are shorter. The other one was what is the shortest legal route? And when I say legal, I'm talking not only, will the cops pick you up and take you somewhere else or tell you to get off the road, but what are not private roads, what paths don't cross native reservations, that sort of thing. And then finally, in addition to safety and legality, we just wanted to get across as fast as we could on roads that we felt confident we wouldn't get killed on. And that's how we ended up with what basically is a 2,845 mile route, I believe.
Now, so there's an online community of people that are kind of helping piece together a route that works. So
Yes,
you're able to reference.
The USA Crossers community on Facebook is it's a pretty tightly knit group, and they trade routes a lot. And I got to give a tip of the hat to John Piper, who gave me the best route through Phoenix. Not Piper, I'm trying to remember his last name now, but gave me the best route through Phoenix. I actually made a mistake of trying to cut a diagonal and ended up in the Gila River Indian Reservation and had to backtrack 6 miles and restart the day. So we've had a couple of misadventures where routes were closed or people didn't want us there. But we tried very hard to keep it on legal roads. And when we make a mistake, backtrack and pick it up again.
So, so you mentioned one, there's legal issues. You got to pick a route that's legal. What makes a route legal, or what makes it
Broadly,
illegal?
broadly speaking, it's not legal to run on the interstate unless it is the only way you can get from point A to point B. Um, there are a few exceptions that are not really worth going into because they're really sort of fringe cases. Originally, when we thought we might set a record for the first run from Disneyland to Disney World, we thought the Guinness people might be interested. I actually heard back from them a few months ago that they don't consider the two Disneys what they call significant endpoints until a large number of people have done that route. So it's not the same as repeating Pete Kostelnick's record-setting run across the U.S. or Marshall Ulrich's Masters record across the U.S. Those have to be on established routes that are accepted for a record setting. But that does figure into the legality in the sense that will the record be recognized by an official record setting group or a records monitoring group? And at this point, I can claim when I finish that I'm the first person to have run from Disneyland to Disney World, but it's not like that's a thing. it's it's just me saying, look what I did.
Well, maybe you're going to make it a thing. You know, people
I
have
hope
to,
so.
and you know, the Adventurers Club prides itself on people that go off the beaten path, right? So having done the first run from Disneyland to Disney World, you're going to be in good company here. So
Maybe I'll get some park passes. I don't know. I'll have to talk to some people I know at Disney.
right. So now you said dangerous. So what are the dangerous aspects of this?
For one thing, if it's possible to, I've actually got some a blog post about this, but the short version is that you don't really want to run on a road with an extremely narrow shoulder or no shoulder. You don't want to find yourself on a route where there are long bridges with nowhere to be between the railing and traffic. And that cuts out some fairly direct routes. You don't really want to be on the interstate, even with a wide shoulder, because it's typically 70 and 80 mile an hour traffic, and things can happen quickly. Somebody
Yeah.
texting, throw something out of a car, lose an eye, that sort of thing.
So
So
the major danger is traffic, getting hit by a car.
that's the primary issue. We looked at some routes through the American Southwest that had 1,000-foot drop-offs that went through the mountains, and we said, there's no reason we need to be running on these switchback roads. Semi trucks coming down the inclines, probably unable to brake effectively. And we just didn't feel like that was a risk we wanted to take. That was one of the reasons we took a route from kind of diagonally southeast through Arizona and then down to Nogales and along New Mexico 8 into El Paso because that was relatively flat. It was a place where we could cross the Continental Divide without a lot of problems and not a lot of switchbacks and narrow shoulders.
So we have a picture of you driving or running along the road here. You are pretty visible. Orange and safety yellow the whole time, huh?
Yes. We learned a while back that honestly you need to be dressed like a traffic cone or people just don't see you.
Yeah. So this is a phenomenal feat for anybody, right? Running across the U.S. And you did mention that a lot of people have done it, but I mean, not to belittle the accomplishment. Most people have not run across the U.S. But what makes you unique is you're a type 1 diabetic, right?
That's correct. It makes it harder for sure.
So not only does it make it harder, is that what kind of got you into this? Like, how did you come about having this goal to run across the United States?
Um,
What's your origin
I think
story?
it probably started when back in 2004. I was not particularly active. I had followed the instructions given to me by my doctor upon my diagnosis in 1972 to avoid exercise, because at the time there were no such thing as glucose meters. There wouldn't be for 8 years. And I made the mistake of following that advice for 42 years. And when I first started running in 2004, really my only goal was to run longer, run faster. And then I came to a point where I realized that I was never going to get faster at the marathons that I was doing, and they were sort of losing their edge in terms of interest to me. And somebody said, well, why don't you run longer? And they got me kind of hooked on ultra running. And that was kind of what drifted me in the direction of, well, what's the longest race I can run, that has finisher medals and stuff like that. And back in 2018, after I did my first Ironman and first 100-mile run in 2017. And in 2018, somebody said, well, there's a run across Iowa. It's 339 miles, and it's a relay, but no one's ever done it solo. And I thought, okay, let's do that. Let's just see how far I can do, how far I can go, and whether that's going to cause a problem for me with the diabetes. And when I managed to do that, I thought, okay, maybe I can go farther. And I got this notion in my head that I was going to run across Texas. Texas, the shortest route that goes all the way across the state is about 850 miles. And that was roughly 2.5 Iowas, basically. And I thought, you know what? There's got to be a way I can do this. And so when I did run Texas, found out by accident when I got to the finish line that I had actually beat the old record by about 2.5 days.
Whoa.
I got to thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to beat anybody's records running across the U.S., but I do want to do this. And that got me kind of hooked on the idea that, what's the most epic thing somebody with a chronic disease can do? And I thought, you know what? Let's find a way to do this. My wife and I planned for a couple of years before it actually turned into anything real. And we learned a lot along the way. But one thing is that, you don't have to be anybody special. I'm a pretty slow guy. I'm almost 60. And I can do this. Pretty much anybody with type 1 can do something short of that. And so someone had mentioned to me a while back, all of you inspire people. But you know what? I would rather not have people go, oh my God, you're so great. I would rather have them say, how did you do that? How can I do that? And then go do it.
So let's talk about how you did do that, because you didn't start with just running across the USA, right? You mentioned that in 2004, you weren't really exercising at all. So how did you end up going from zero to, across the U.S.? Did you start running? How did that process go, like going from no exercise to running?
My wife got me to thinking that I was capable of doing a 5K. Probably it was, I think it was November of 2004. I had started being physically active after 42 years of not doing that. And then I got the news from my retina specialist that I needed to have a treatment on my eye that to prevent proliferative diabetic retinopathy that would actually leave me blind in a spot in my retina. But that was the trade-off. And every time that problem popped back up again, I was going to have another treatment, and I was going to end up a little bit more blind in order to prevent me from being completely blind. And that didn't seem like a good path to be on. And I felt a little cheated that I had started being a good boy, and now this was coming up. And I guess after being encouraged to joined my wife in being physically active, I thought, you know what? I know this is full of problems, but it's full of problems if I don't do it.
Yeah.
And I think fundamentally for me, it was realizing that you have to take a risk.
So with the retinopathy, since then, has that condition progressed at all, or have you found that being active and having your levels in control has kind of delayed that?
Yes and no. It has certainly not gotten worse. But as you may know, people with type 1 is fundamentally an autoimmune disorder uh, characterized by systemic inflammatory response from the immune system. And one of the effects that has is that the retinas tend to be swollen. That's one of the reasons that some of the small blood vessels tend to bleed. And you can't entirely get rid of that inflammation without curing the disease, and there is no cure yet. So I do have some inflammation in my retina. My retina specialist has said basically it is at a point where it's not getting worse, but it's not good being the way it is. But so far hasn't recommended any drastic treatments for it. And that was what I wanted back in 2004. So I'm feeling okay about it right now.
So you mentioned your wife kind of helped you along with this. What's your wife's role now that you're running across the United States?
She and I started running 5Ks together. She's not really an ultra runner type person. So as I've started to push the distances, she has volunteered for the hero in the shadows role, which is the crew, basically the folks who do everything but the running. And she has supported me with incredible dedication throughout these crazier and crazier endeavors.
We have this picture of this van. Is she the driver of the runner van?
She is definitely the driver. That photo was at the Pine Springs Safety Rest area, actually, about a day before my father passed away, and we were feeling good until the next day came. So
Yeah. So while you were on this run, you mentioned earlier that your father did pass away,
yes, he did.
and he was a supporter of your run.
He was a big fan. I think I didn't realize how big a fan until I was kind of forced to.
Think we lost you there, Don. Don is out in the field right now on adventure, and I'm not sure where his internet connection is. But Don,
Part
if
of
you
the
can hear us, we
psychology
just
of doing.
lost you, and you're now back.
Oh, sorry about that.
So
I guess I was saying, spending most of my life trying to make him proud and realizing that he already was and had always been. That just kind of left me speechless.
so so when you were on your run, he passed away, and we have this picture of some stuff that you left on his gravestone. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Yeah, that was actually March 9th. So that was a day before yesterday. When I learned that he had passed, I was actually had just reached the Pine Springs Safety Rest area between El Paso and Carlsbad, just short of the New Mexico border. And I had sent him a text basically saying that I was taking a rest for a little while. And he said, well, you deserve that rest. And then we got the news the next morning that he had passed away. After the funeral, started running back probably a little too soon, about a week afterwards. And members of my family had said that my dad would have wanted me to finish. And so I got it in my head I needed to finish. And I was very down when I started back running again in Carlsbad, or rather, excuse me, into Carlsbad from the Pine Springs. And I made my dad a promise out on I believe it was New Mexico 176, turns into Texas 176 going into Andrews. And I said, if I make it to Greenwood, I'll leave you my running shoes. And, this is my way of basically saying, he had run a great race and I thought he deserved a race bib and a good pair of shoes.
And how many miles did you put on those shoes before you laid them down there?
Um, those shoes in particular, I had especially equipped them to use desert gaiters. I used those shoes to run across the Mojave Desert, the Sonoran and the Chihuahuan. And then I switched to shoes that weren't equipped for desert running because it was just a little too much extra effort with all the Velcro on those shoes. So I kind of felt like those were special shoes. They had done something not too many people had done, and I wanted him to have the best pair of shoes I had in the van.
Nice. So it's amazing. Can you walk us through like what a day in your life looks like when you're out there? Like I want to hear about the logistics and how you put this together because you've got so many different things to keep track of. I mean, again, this is a hard thing for a normal person to do, but you have to do this while managing your blood sugar at the same time and the food and everything else and the exertion. So you start pretty early.
A typical day starts, depending on how long the drive is, between 5 and 5:30 in the morning. We wake up, it takes about an hour to get ready. That's putting on all the gear I think I'll need for the first few hours of the morning. Sunscreen, boonie hats, gaiters, windbreaker, whatever it takes for that day. And then typically the drive out to the starting point is somewhere between 10 minutes and 45 minutes most of the time. Sometimes it's a little bit longer and we get up earlier to try and save a little more sunlight. Once we get out on the route, we typically plan on doing about 10 to 11 hours of running. We stop before sunset. I have run races before where I ran all through the night, and I'm not a fan of running after dark. Oddly, I don't mind running a little bit before dawn, but vision, even in a normal person, is not as good at night, and especially not with motorists. And doesn't matter how much you light yourself up. Some people will drive towards you. And so we try to get all our running done. These days, the sun is setting, I think, about 6:15 or something like that. So we try to get our running done by 5:30, 5:45 p.m. And after that, usually what happens is we go back to where we were staying. And if it's a new place that we're staying, we have a kind of a COVID protocol that we follow for wiping the place down to make sure that, and opening the windows to make sure that it's as clean as it can be. And then we turn in and do it all over again.
So where do you end up staying at night? Where do you go to?
We had, when we started the run, we were typically staying in hotels. I got my vaccine a few weeks ago, and my wife hasn't had hers yet. One of the few advantages of having a chronic disease is you get the vaccines early. Mm-hmm. And we had to change the protocol from staying in hotels to basically stopping the run while we were trying to figure out what we were going to do about COVID. And we started to monitor the numbers from Johns Hopkins to see what we thought a safe number was in terms of hospitalizations and deaths and that sort of thing. And we kind of came up with this, I guess I would call it sort of a thumbnail estimate of how safe it would be if I were out there running and got smacked in the side of the head by somebody's side view mirror and had to go to a hospital, and they had to treat me in the parking lot. So, if that was the situation we were getting into, then we weren't comfortable being out there running. So we started to get to a level of comfort with the COVID numbers where we thought, okay, hospitalizations don't look bad, but where are we going to stay? We don't want to stay in high traffic areas. We don't want to stay in places with open restaurants and no masks and that sort of thing. So we kind of came up with this protocol of using Airbnb, which will tell you how long a property has been vacant before you reserve it.
Huh.
And we started reserving properties that had been vacant for at least 3 days, had openable windows, and met Airbnb's enhanced COVID cleaning standard. And generally, we stay in one place for several days, so we don't have to clean places every single day with Clorox. But that's kind of our protocol, and it's been working actually fairly well. I still don't feel like this is the time to go hang out at a place with a lot of people, but the run is actually a perfect example of social isolation, so it works pretty well.
Right. So we have this map that you put together on your website, and it shows what you're going to run into. So when you created this map and you're looking at, I guess, northern Louisiana and northern Alabama or northern Mississippi, what were you just looking at that and you're like, wow, I'm going into some, I mean, they are red states, but going into deep purple states in terms of COVID numbers.
Dark purple states, yeah.
Yeah.
There's two sides to the story about that map. One is that the area in Texas leading up to that, and pretty much the whole state at the time, this was several months ago, was light pink, which was a pretty low risk number. I think because good long sections of Texas are fairly unpopulated, and it's kind of hard to spread when your nearest neighbor lives 20 miles away.
Yeah.
And we, back in, I think it was September we originally had to pause the run March 24th of 2020, and we watched the numbers go awful. And then we noticed in September that the numbers were down on the western section of that map, and decided to make a run for it, literally, and knocked off about 550 miles of the remaining route across Texas. Numbers still weren't looking good in the southeast at the time. And then we saw a window open for starting the run back up just over a week ago, where the deep southeast actually didn't look bad. Tallahassee still looks like a challenge, but even around Montgomery, the numbers are looking better. So we decided, when we stopped in Texarkana, it was right at 1,800 miles. And we thought, you know what, we've got 1,000 miles to go. Let's see how far we can get before we have to stop. And right now, it doesn't look too bad. I don't know the exact numbers, but I want to say we're around 2,070 miles so far. And we need to finish 2,845. So I believe we've got less than 800 miles to go.
So does it feel close or does it feel far from where you're sitting right now?
To me, it feels close. I run across Texas twice, and it was 850 miles both times. So anything less than 850 feels like a cakewalk, to be honest.
Yeah. So I wanted to pull up this picture here that we have, just to show the social distancing, I guess, that you're able to. Yeah, I don't see anybody else in that picture.
Yeah, I don't either. And in fact, if you go into Lorain, you won't see anybody either.
So now, does your wife just drive behind you in the car? Does she follow you and, kind of do that slow drive?
Actually, yeah, that's dangerous and illegal.
Really?
Cops will tell you not to do that. So what she does, and this is generally what they recommend doing, is hopscotching the runner however many miles they think they can go without needing to stop for a drink or get something to eat. Some people, I'm a big fan of a fellow runner named Jacob Federoff, who can just run. and he just seems to suck nutrition out of the air. But for me, I have to stop about every 3.5 to 4 miles, partly because my blood sugar starts to come down, and my wife gets the numbers from my CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. And generally speaking, she can tell when I need to eat. So she'll pull up just far enough for me to run my numbers down, and then we sort of lather, rinse, and repeat. She feeds me, I keep running, and she feeds me again.
So let's look at this real quick. I've got a picture that you posted of a day in your life, right? So you ran for 9 hours and 43 minutes and 57 seconds, and I can actually see those little stops. What it looks like you got about 10 runs in there, about 3 miles apiece. So are you doing like 10 5Ks a day, basically?
Basically, yeah.
That's the plan. And in between those, your wife's refueling you, so she'll hop ahead to wherever she needs to go, and then when you get to the van, you get to eat and then take off
Yes,
again.
and sit down. Sitting down is very important to me.
What kind of you have a nice chair that comes out of the back of that van?
We have a couple of camp stools, and we actually put some padding on the floor, so I could sit on the floor on the side of the van. It's a little bit more away from traffic, and it's actually fairly comfortable in there.
Now, do
It's
you have a
packed
tent
to the
on the top
gills,
of
but
that
it's
van? Did
comfortable.
I see a tent on the top of that van? I was looking at the.
Yes, you did. That I believe is I'm trying to remember the brand name. It's a Columbus variant. I think it was Auto Home, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway, it's basically a double bed. Um, we slept in the tent in a few places in the desert in February, where overnights were below freezing, and it's quite comfortable in there. We actually had to open the side zippers a little bit to get some ventilation going because we were cooking in there from our own body heat.
Now, do you
So
just
it's
try
it's
to
a nice
sleep in a
tent.
tent to avoid that drive in the morning from wherever you're staying to save some time? Or
We've been tempted at times. To to be honest, it's as good a night as good a night's sleep as you can get in a tent, but it still doesn't beat sleeping in a comfy bed.
yeah,
So we kind of drew the line at about an hour's drive and said if the closest place we can stay is over an hour away, then darn it, we're going to find an RV park and sleep in the tent.
that makes sense. All right, so tell us about your kit here. We got a picture of your kit as well. This is all your stuff. Multiple pairs of shoes, multiple
Yeah,
hats. What do you got there?
I get about 300 miles out of a pair of shoes. I primarily use the Innovate Road Claw. They're actually a sponsor of mine. They've been very generous with the shoes. I tend to use those. They're sort of a hybrid trail and road shoe. The soles on them have hard rubber lugs, which make it a little bit easier to run on pavement. Most shoes that you buy to run a marathon or something like that are fairly spongy and comfy, but after a while you can feel everything. So these are good for running on pat gravel. They last a real long time. What happens sometimes after a while is that I'll start to hurt in the arches of my feet, and I do sometimes run in Brooks Transcends. Downside of those is that they fan out a lot at the bottom, and they're very spongy. And if the terrain is dodgy, you actually can't feel the risks that you're stepping on. So it's easy to end up landing on a broken bottle or something like that, which I really don't like to do. That said, they're comfy shoes, but I tend to go back and forth between the Innovates and the Brooks.
And then, is there anything else special that you have in here? Everything else is just running clothes,
Yeah,
huh? What's that?
the boonie hat, the over on the left-hand side there, that orange blob right next to the shoes. That's a Shelta boonie hat, which was primarily designed for desert runners types. It's similar to like what you would picture an American Foreign Legion, sorry, French Foreign Legion kind of hat.
Right. It has
So there's
the
a
things that come down in the back.
Kalahari flap in the back,
Yeah.
and basically from the ears forward is a cowboy hat, and it's bright orange.
Everything's bright
Most of the
orange or
other
bright
stuff is
yellow, right?
regular, down straight. Most of the other stuff in there is just regular running clothes. I do have I guess you would call it, the brand is Orange Mud. It's called a Hydro Quiver, but it holds a couple of water bottles. One thing I've learned, I used to run with a hydration bladder, very similar to what you might bring on a long bike ride. And the problem is that there's just no air between the bladder and your back, and you start to sweat and get a rash, and then it's really miserable. And with the quiver, basically there's a lot of air passing between the water bottles and your back, and it stays cool and it balances on your shoulders pretty well.
Now, do you carry any food along with you? I mean, your wife's always
I
5
do.
kilometers or less away, right? But what do
I
you do?
do.
You have food or something on board?
I carry runner's gels, which I have learned to dislike. Um,
That's
one
like
of
the
the things
goo,
that
right? It's like GU or the
yeah,
the power gel or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, I generally use those to treat low blood sugars, or if there is some reason that Leslie can't stop in 5K or so, and she has to go, 6 miles, then when I hit that 3 mile mark and my blood sugar starts to drop, I take a look at where she is. We use a family locator type thing that some people give their kids this app so they know if they got home safe from school. But basically, we track each other, and if I know she's 6 miles ahead, not I can only make it three, then I'll tap into the runner shells.
So how often do you have to tap into your emergency stash, so to speak?
Today was the first time in a week, and I started to notice that I was getting out of gas, and I looked down at the reading on my CGM, and it was like you're 95 and dropping, which anybody who isn't diabetic knows 95 is a normal number, but not with a down arrow. So I knew I was going to be in trouble if I didn't get something to eat. So I tapped into those gels.
So a normal person, their blood sugar runs between, what are we going to call it, 80 and 120, right?
Yes, yes,
So
definitely in that range.
95 seems normal, right? But if you're 95 and dropping, what does that mean for you?
Um, in terms of the risk to someone with type 1, um, a super low blood sugar, which would probably be something below 70 or even below 60, um, your judgment starts to get clouded below about 80 milligrams per deciliter glucose in the bloodstream. So you can make bad decisions, decide you want to go whiz in the bushes, and the next thing you know, you're on somebody's farm and you don't know how you got there. Um, it's even riskier if your sugar gets below 60 or so because there's a risk of unconsciousness. And so when I see it dropping like that, I know I need to get something with sugar. And the gels are a pretty fast source of that. And they also double as decent fuel if I can't catch up with the van.
So it sounds like you have the logistics pretty wired down. So let's talk about like what your actual. You said you had a CGM. What kind of CGM do you use? And this
I
monitors your blood
use
sugar, right?
yes, it's a continuous glucose monitor. I use the Dexcom G6 in combination with a Tandem T-Slim X2 using their control IQ algorithm. So it's designed basically to give you a little extra insulin if your sugar is above a high threshold and to back off of it or stop delivery completely if it's below a low threshold. Um, when I started the run, I was not particularly insulin sensitive because I had not been active for a few days. And I basically ran it in normal mode, but it also has something called exercise mode, which lets you run a little bit higher and helps minimize the risk of some lows. And I've been running it in exercise mode, generally speaking, most of the day. One thing I've kind of learned is that at the end of the day, when I stop running, my blood sugar tends to drop. I've actually been able to throw down something like 50 grams of carbs without having it have any effect on my blood sugar.
And 50 grams
And
of carbs is like a Snickers bar, right? So basically,
uh, pretty
or how many
close to it,
Oreos? You said
yeah.
you really liked Oreos, right? So how many Oreos is that?
Oh gosh. So I usually eat the Oreo 2 packs, and those are 15 grams a piece. So that would be probably 8 Oreos, something like that.
Huh.
It's the equivalent of a quarter pounder with cheese. I know that
Huh.
from practice.
So just for the lay people out there, right? Because I got to remember, not everybody's a diabetic, right? You have a sensor that tells you what your blood sugar is all the time, and that feeds into
Yes,
your pump that automatically now adjusts your insulin.
that's correct.
Now this is a pretty new thing. Like not a lot of diabetics out there have this. I know I don't. I've got
Just
the
within the last
I've
six
got the
months, I
sensor,
think.
right? But I don't have the
There
connection.
you go.
So so how do you recommend that to people? If should diabetics out there, is this a thing that's worked for you as an athlete to have this closed loop system working?
Yes, it's actually worked really well. When we started the run, it wasn't available, and I was actually treated very kindly by my friends at Tandem and Dexcom. They gave me the VIP tour of the facilities, and one of them asks me kind of bluntly, "Well, why aren't you using Control IQ?" And you know how they always say, "Never try a new pair of shoes before a marathon."
Yeah.
That was basically the reason. I didn't want to tweak something at the very end, right before I started the run. Well, I had to pause it in March for COVID reasons. And in late March, early April, I contacted the Tandem people and said, "All right, upgrade me. I've got time to kill." And they did. And to be honest, it has been amazing. You think that having a pump that dials your insulin back when you're starting to go low, that's the greatest thing in the world. It's actually even better to have one that sort of cautiously doses you when you start to go high, because it flattens your blood sugars, and it feels like not being diabetic, to be honest.
That's pretty cool. And that wasn't available because, like you said, you were diagnosed in 1972, and back then
That's correct.
you didn't have blood. You didn't even have test strips. You had to go to the hospital to check your blood sugar, right?
That's right. It was about 8 years before test strips came out.
Wow. So you've lived through quite some innovations, right? So now your wife can your wife see what your blood sugar is?
Yes, I actually have the sensor talks Bluetooth to my phone, and she has an app that follows my blood sugar. And one of the things that's turned out to be pretty cool about the run is that she can tell pretty much when when we've just had a fuel stop or something like that, and I start running, 10, 15 minutes into it, she can see what my sugar is doing. And by the time I meet the van again, she knows, okay, 2 Oreos and applesauce and a whey shake.
Huh.
But she's figured out what I need to eat based on what my sugar is, the app is telling her my sugar is.
Did she used to
And
work for
that's turned
NASA, monitoring the astronauts? So she can
out.
track you. So she's got you on GPS. She can track you and see how you're running, and she can see exactly what
Yeah.
your blood sugar is. So when you roll into that van, she's got a meal. That sounds great.
Yeah, she's just like, here, eat this.
You guys have it made out there,
That
huh?
works pretty nice. I just got to do the running. That's all. She does everything else.
Just one foot in front of the next, right? So you
If
have
there's room for 2 feet.
you have 800 miles or so left, or 700.
I think it's like 750 or something, somewhere in between 700 and 800. I kind of lost track once we got in the middle of Mississippi, but
So the standard line is when you win the lottery or win a big baseball game, right? What do they say? They say, "What are you going to do next?" And the guy says, "I'm going to Disney World," right? So my question is, once you've made it to Disney World, well, are you even going to go to Disney World at the end, or are you just going to dip your toe in the Atlantic Ocean and then go home?
um, what we're hoping to do is, I know it's a little bit of a complicated answer, but when we reach Disney World, one of the things we wanted to make sure that we did was to stay on legal roads, which means we can't use most of the roads surrounding Disney World because they're multi-lane, limited access freeways, basically similar to the interstate, or they're private Disney roads that not everyone can run on, so we can't run on them. But we found a legal route that is pedestrian safe that goes right past the gate of the Magic Kingdom. And so we'll be coming in near Cass Parking and heading south on the road that goes past the Contemporary and the gate to the Magic Kingdom. So that's where we plan to do the photo op. We have reached out to Disney to see if anyone wants to meet us there. And after that, it's just finishing the miles out to Melbourne so that we can dip a toe in the water, like you said.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll tell you. I did the Florida Trail, right, and it goes through Orlando. Orlando,
Yes.
no fun. It was a lot of
Yeah.
because I think the place you want to be as a runner is like this picture of you on the highway, right? Open spanses. Let's pull that up. The open spanses, right? Beautiful scenery. You don't want to be in a city, right? And I think you mentioned Phoenix was tough, right? It was hard to find a.
Um, yeah, what was tough about Phoenix was that we had to kind of zigzag through the town on roads that were accessible to pedestrians and also got us through Arizona. Um, I'm not sure the exact number, but something like 80% of Arizona is Native American land.
Hmm.
And even the roads between Phoenix and Tucson are only there because the non-natives have an easement on the property to build the interstate through it. And so we had to be very careful that we stayed off of reservations on official state highways because those were both pedestrian safe and didn't go into native land.
And now, if you were to go on native land, do they hassle you, or are they okay with it?
I
Have you
wouldn't
had
say they
run-ins?
hassle. I wouldn't say they hassle. I was actually treated very kindly by one of the Apache officers at the Gila River Indian Reservation. I had gotten 6 miles onto the reservation. The only criticism I would say is the signage was not that good. Um, but I had gotten 6 miles onto the reservation, and he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, Kamatki, which is the right near where the casino is, just off the interstate. And he said, "No, you're not." And I said, "How come?" And he said, "You're not supposed to be here. You're trespassing. This is unless you're a tribal member, you shouldn't be here."
Hmm.
And I said, "Okay, and I got you there. What do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Well, you really need to get off the property and go back to wherever it is you got on it." But he was kind the whole time. I think that was where talking to other people on the USA Crossers group was very helpful because it was actually John who clued me in. John Price. I kept calling him John Piper
Uh-huh.
earlier. It was John Price. He's kind of the route guru at the USA Crossers group. And he basically said, "You know what? You really need to follow this exact path through Phoenix and Tucson. And what you do after that, it's up to you." I chose to go all the way down to Nogales because I wanted to avoid some dangerous tunnels through mountainsides. But Arizona was harder than most of the states because of that. But the picture you were showing just outside of Lorain, Texas, that was a wonderful road. Good time of year, very quiet, very pleasant place to run.
So now, do you think if you had booked a room at the casino that they would have let you run through?
That perhaps they might have.
I have a
One of the
reservation, of
concerns
course. I need to
yeah,
stay there. That's my room.
yeah. Well, that's the funny part. Even if I had been able to do that, the fact that pedestrians are not supposed to be on that road
Yeah,
basically meant that had I submitted it as a record to Guinness, they would have said, well, that's a private road. And Guinness doesn't allow running on interstates or private roads or any kind of road that one person can be on and another person cannot.
interesting.
So I consciously chose not to do that.
Huh. That's interesting. So have you ever? So you mentioned you got pulled over, so to speak. Have you ever been pulled over by any other law enforcement along your travels?
No, there have been quite a few that were very curious about what we were doing. But one of the things we did before we started the run was to find out what were
We lost you there, Don. You're gonna have to.
the, sorry,
Let's back up a little bit there. You said one of the things that you do before the run is be. Yeah. We got you back.
sure. You can hear me now, right?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
We asked law enforcement to tell us what would be safe to do or the safest thing to do if we were choosing to run across the country. And we got some good advice on which roads to be on, which roads to stay off of. So most of the time when we were approached by law enforcement, it was not, why are you here? What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. It was more along the lines of, so I see all the logos on the van. What are you guys doing? The only time I ever felt kind of overly conscious about it was running along New Mexico 9, and the Border Patrol was everywhere. And a little bit of a funny story to tell you. I found a quiet stretch of road, and I thought, you know what? Okay, well, I'm just going to pop off in the bushes and relieve myself. And the next thing I hear a helicopter overhead. And I'm like, geez, I can't even whiz in the bushes without the
You must
Border
have been
Patrol
pissing on
being
one of
there.
those seismic sensors or something.
Or maybe on the border wall. I don't know what their issue was, but they got to know us going across Arizona and New Mexico, and after a while, they're just like, okay, well, you guys have a good time.
Yeah.
So we were treated very kindly.
So in addition to your wife in the van with your blood sugar and your location, you probably had a predator above you too, kind of tracking you the whole way. Probably targeted.
Probably, yeah, probably. Well, I mean, you show up in the middle of the New Mexico desert with a white van. God only knows what's in it. I mean, you're asking for it, right?
Right. Well, again, but you look at this picture. I don't think you're trying to sneak across the border there. I wouldn't guess that that's what you were up
Yeah,
to.
no. My only concern with wearing orange was in 2019 when I ran across Texas. Um, there was a piece of the route. It was a northbound highway just south of just south of New Boston, Texas. It's a little bit west of Texarkana. And I was running north along the route, and I'm wearing bright orange. And then I look over to my right, and it's a prison complex. And I thought to myself, man, orange is not a good color right now. But other than that,
All the signs
never
on the
been
side
an
of the road
issue.
that says "Don't pick up the hitchhikers," right? There
Yeah,
you
don't pick
are.
up guys dressed in orange.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny.
That would have been a good bib to wear. You can have. You said you always wore a number runner's bib, right? It didn't say DOC on it, right? Department of
Yeah, I
Corrections.
wouldn't want to have that.
But what was the runner's bib
Yeah, I
that you
wouldn't
would
want to
wear?
have
Because
that.
this wasn't like an official race or anything, right? So what would you wear on your bib?
Right. Um, it's interesting you should ask. The bib that I run in says T1D, which is about all like that's recognizable from the street that anyone would recognize as having anything to do with type 1. But I picked that for two reasons. One is I wanted to raise awareness, and people would always ask, oh, what's the T1D mean? But the other one is that I found out with law enforcement that the more your van has logos on it, and the more you're wearing a race bib, and you've got a GPS tracker and a couple of watches, they don't really want to know what you're doing on the road. They know what you're doing on the road. You're running across the country.
And you're not a homeless person.
We found out, yeah, we found out that the more that I was dressed in ratty old running shirts and stuff like that, people were like, "Do you need anything? Someplace to sleep for the night?" So we kind of stuck with stuff that makes it obvious what we're doing.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's funny how stuff like that just kind of creeps up on you, but we've learned over time that there are some things that are what I would call best practices that just make life easier.
Yeah. I found that to be the case when I was hiking. I'm like, I just look like a homeless person right now. And if I had
There's
if I
a,
had have known that knowledge that you have, it probably would have been easier on me in a lot of circumstances.
there's a lot of folks that run across the U.S. who don't load up on running gear and brand name this and brand name that, and do a perfectly good job in a pair of cross trainers and a straw hat. I think that, in defense of their choices, you go with what works. If it doesn't work for you to be asked by law enforcement, why are you doing out here? Then, that may be where you change to something a little more obvious. But I have a lot of respect for people who basically do this sort of thing on a budget, pushing a baby carriage. In the USA Crosser community, they actually have what are called crewed runs, which is what I'm doing with a crew. And then the ones that are self-crewed, which is usually with the baby carriages, and they refer to those as screwed, it's just self-crewed. And really, in many ways, they are kind of screwed.
So they're pushing all their food, all their gear in that baby carriage.
Yeah, and for most of them, the biggest challenge is getting through the Southwest. There are several stretches where it can be close to 100 miles with nothing, and it's almost impossible to carry enough water and push it and push. If you're carrying enough water to drink for 150 miles or 100 miles, it weighs so much that it makes it harder to do. And so you get in this sort of nasty circle of how much water can I afford not to take?
Right. Yeah, so that's 4 to 5 days of water, right? So that's four to
Yeah,
five
typically.
gallons. So each gallon's 8 pounds. So that's
Yeah, it's
what,
like 40 pounds of
40
water.
pounds of water? And then you still have to have your food and your tent and everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Some
that
people use
big baby.
tent poncho type setups
Uh-huh.
where they can wear in the rain and also sleep in it. But definitely, I have a great deal of admiration for guys who do this with that tiny little amount of space and weight limitations and stuff like that. I feel like a little bit of I don't know, I don't want to say cheater, but having a crew and being able to just stop and sit in the van, that's a luxury I'm very grateful for.
I had this instructor, an outdoors instructor once, and he didn't say it was cheating, right? He would be out there, and we're all sitting around in the rain with our ponchos on, and he pops out an umbrella, and we kind of gave him a hard time at first, but then he's like, "This is how you do it with style." We're in the middle of Alaska. This guy has an umbrella. We never even thought to do that, but this guy does it so much. He likes that little creature comfort, and he packs his umbrella so he doesn't have
Sure,
to get rained on. So it's style. You do it with
sure.
style, and that's a good thing.
That is awesome.
So what we like to do at the end here is we like to do a little Q&A, and we have some questions from the chat, right? Our YouTube channel's got some questions, so we're going to bring those up right now, and we're going to ask some questions from the audience, so to speak. You ready for that?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
I'm ready.
Here we go. One second from off stage. Yeah. All right. So Jay Foonberg asks, you do refer to we a lot. Who is we? We talked about how you're on a
Um,
supported rent, but who is your crew?
my wife Leslie and I, and that's the we.
Okay. So your crew is just one person.
Just one person.
God bless her. Did you
I
ever
know.
did
I
you ever
don't
have a
know where
bigger
I would ever
crew?
find one like that.
Larry Stern asks, and I'm going to expand this question. Did you ever bump into a man named Forrest Gump? Did you
It's funny you should ask that. I have the insulin pump, and occasionally some people refer to me as Forrest Pump.
That's a good one. So, so Forrest Pump. Have you ever run into some other people in this community of USA crossers? Right.
When we were scouting our route across Alabama, we were in the car, we were in the van, and I did run across a guy pushing a baby carriage along a section of road. And my first thought when I saw the guy in running gear pushing the baby carriage is, give him some Gatorade, give him some Rice Krispie treats. Just this guy needs some love because it's pretty lonely out there, and felt an instant connection with him. Out in New Mexico, just out, no, it was Arizona, just outside of Sonoyta, we ran across a guy riding a bike across the country. And then I'm trying to remember, I think it was in New Mexico, there was a German fellow, all I remember is his first name was Heiko, that was doing something very similar. But there's always this moment of recognition when you spot somebody, they're doing something epic, and you feel a connection with what they're attempting to do, and you just want them to succeed in any way possible. And it's almost like instant brotherhood out there.
Yeah, that's cool. So the spirit of Forrest Gump is strong, which is a cool thing, Like there's a lot of people that are doing these epic things out there, and that's cool to be able to connect with them, right?
Yeah, it's really great to meet them.
So Jay Foonberg asks, I'm 85. I do 5Ks and 10Ks. Would you recommend training for ultras?
Sure. What I would say, I don't know that age is really an issue, um, but I would give this advice to anyone: learn to train within what you are able to do. Don't listen to people whose immediate assumption is, oh, I want to go faster, or I want to run harder, or I want to win things. It's not always about winning. Sometimes it's about getting up, putting on your shoes, and going out and seeing what you're capable of.
Annie Manita asks, how do you choose your shoes? Do they change based on the terrain?
We talked a little bit about that earlier when you were asking about the kit. I do choose shoes that allow me to feel enough of the road that I don't necessarily have to look for hazards all the time. If I can feel that the terrain is changing, then a pair of shoes that allows me to feel that without feeling every little stone is a good choice for the day. What tends to happen over time is that my feet get a little sore just from repeated banging on them. And I'll shift into a fresh pair of similar shoes, or maybe into a different style of shoe, depending on how late in the day it is.
Do you feel like you have any diabetic complications with your feet? Because I know that's something that a lot of people associate with diabetes, is that there's foot complications.
I don't. I actually had somebody tell me about 15 years ago that I did, and then I went and actually had a nerve conductance test done, and it disproved that assertion. So I have not really had any issues. What I have noticed is that diabetic or not, if you don't pay attention to your feet, they're generally the first problem you have. So I try to pay a lot of attention to my feet just for um, good running wisdom reasons.
Right.
I'm aware of the fact that if something goes south or there's an injury, that it's possible that my immune system may respond abnormally, and I try to be mindful of that.
So that's good information. Mimo Rivera asked, what is your dream run? And we had a picture of what might be your dream run. We'll ask you about it. Is this your dream run?
I don't know about that. The problem with that is getting through South Sudan and the Gaza Strip, in all seriousness. I think the rest of it is probably getting a lot of visas arranged ahead of time.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know beyond the US run whether I would want to move to running. I've kind of got a dream of doing a 12.5 mile swim around Key West, which would take a lot less training and preparation than a USA run. This has been kind of a resource hog and it's taken time away from family, and that's something I've uh, regretted a fair bit, that it has absorbed me so much that sometimes very important things fall by the wayside.
You do get to spend a lot of time with your wife, though, right?
I do, but I have a brother and two sisters, and another brother in Florida that I want to visit more often. And I'm actually looking forward to mid-April when we're done with this run, hopefully, making some trips in the summer when the COVID situation gets a little bit better, and just spending some time not doing anything. And then I'll get bored and do something, do something else epic, but it's not on my mind right now.
So around Key West is 12 and a half miles,
Yes.
and that's the next big thing you think that's on your list?
It's a goal of mine. I when during the summer when it looked to me like we weren't going to be able to run again until the fall, my heart kind of fell out of running for a little while, and I took to swimming out at a local lake and got my mileage up to about 6 miles. And I thought, well, that's not too bad. I just need to be able to do twice that, and I can enter this Key West thing. And I do kind of have a love of swimming because it was the one sport that I absolutely knew for a fact I did not know how to do a few years ago. And there's something to be said for finding something you're bad at and getting decent at it.
It's a pretty good workout, huh?
It's a lot more cardio than running.
Yeah.
The other thing about swimming, which has helped with running, is that it puts you in a state of mind where you must think calmly and you must control your stress level. And I have learned to transfer some of that to running. And definitely stress can be an issue on a busy highway. So those are good skills to have.
So that leads into our next question here. Andy Medina asks, how do you manage your headspace? What do you do to keep yourself going, or what are you just thinking about as you're running?
Okay, a serious answer and a funny answer first, and then a serious answer.
Okay.
The funny answer is the inside of my head is like Nickelodeon. It's
Just dumb cartoons playing 24/7.
Just yeah, it's pretty much habit, that kind of stuff. The serious answer is I kind of weave back and forth between singing to myself. I don't wear earbuds because that keeps me from hearing traffic, and I've learned to be very sensitized to what's going on around me. But I hear a truck coming from behind me, I can stop singing anytime I want.
Right.
Problem is I don't know the words that well, and there's nobody there to tell me what they really are.
So you're
a lot
making
of
up
the
the
time it's
lyrics,
like,
and thus the
yeah,
Nickelodeon.
da, 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 sailors dancing and whatever. So I spend a little bit of time doing that, but especially when today was a good example. There was a stretch between Greenwood, Mississippi, which is my hometown, in fact, and Winona, where the terrain was very technical, and the cost of making a mistake meant falling down a steep embankment into a bunch of thorns. So I had to be super aware of what I was doing, and I began to notice that my blood sugar was rising because of the stress. And I had to go to a quiet place in my head. And it actually helps to work on some mindfulness techniques. When you're not running, do things like yoga just to kind of calm yourself down. And that's just something I've learned that you actually have to do because it's possible to end the day completely wired and wondering how you got through it alive. And that's not a good place to be.
And then Sean Thompson asked, how do you prevent chafing blisters? You mentioned you take care of your feet, number one, right? But
Yeah.
how do you deal with that other stuff?
I use a product called Sport Shield. It's made by an outfit called Two Toms. I think there's a company that owns them, but it's basically WD-40 for your body, so it's not toxic and stuff like that. But it's super lubricating. I actually wear blister-resistant socks, which basically two thin pairs of socks sewn around each other, so that when your outer sock slips, the inner sock doesn't rub your foot. And then I also tape my feet with a strength tape and then lubricate the outside of the tape so that I get in a situation where my feet want to move in the shoe and start rubbing against something. They either don't move or they move as smoothly as they can. I've also taken to wearing these. You can get these little gel sleeves that you can put around a toe that's starting to bother another toe. And so right now I don't have any blisters. And I've been, how far have I been? Close to 300 miles. I haven't had any blisters, so
Now,
that's
have
pretty
you
good.
found that as you go on like 300, 400, 500 miles, you can start to taper off on those measures that you take because your feet get stronger? Or are you doing that the whole time?
Not generally. The closest to that I would say is that back when I was in New Mexico, I had some areas on my toes that were starting to irritate each other, and I taped them. I applied blister bandages type, stuff to them, and then I noticed a week or two later that they had just kind of healed on their own, and they weren't bothering anybody anymore. So I took off all the extra hardware. And I did continue to tape my feet, but what I find is if nothing is complaining, then don't do anything about it. If it starts to be a problem, fix it immediately.
I was just thinking, I have another question for you personally. Have you had any, like, as you're doing this, right, you're putting your body through an enormous amount of stress, right? Have you had any, like, detractors or doctors that have said, hey, you really got to back off and stop running so far? Or has everybody generally been supportive of you?
Everyone's generally been supportive. My endocrinologist sort of views me as a research case on extreme activity in type 1. My immunologist is fascinated by my stories of stress response and so forth. He's particularly fascinated by exercise-induced cytokine reactions. That this is what they call runner's flu sometimes. So they've been very supportive. I had my foot doctor turn me on to Voltaren gel, which is basically kind of like Motrin for your feet. And it's been great when I've had some soreness that I needed to deal with before running the next day.
And it sounds like this whole thing has made your blood sugar control actually a lot better, right?
Unless I have a day that's absolute hell, it has. It's helped a lot. It's kept things fairly level. High stress day, everything goes out the window though.
And high stress day do you normally go high, and then how do you deal with that?
Best example of a high stress day was when I ran across Texas. There was a 41-mile stretch from Kermit, Texas to Odessa. That when we scouted it, it was very quiet. When we ran it, it was very busy, and it was full of oil field traffic. And several people stopped us on the road and said, "Good God, what are you doing on this road? This is the second most dangerous road in Texas." And I said, well, really? Because when I looked at it on Google, it was like two cars. And they said, no, get off this road as fast as you can. I'm not saying, don't run on it, but finish the day as fast as you can. And so I hauled butt the last 6 miles into Odessa. And when I got to Odessa, my sugar was like 300, which is more
Jeez.
than more than twice normal, and at the level where people start feeling, cramps, lots of very unpleasant high blood sugar symptoms. And I thought, okay, I need to dose this down. This is not good. I need to get some insulin. Well, I got some insulin, and as soon as the stress stopped, my blood sugar dropped. And late that night, about 11 o'clock, my blood sugar was 20 milligrams per deciliter, which below that is generally when people start having seizures.
20. You
And
dropped to 20.
Leslie got
Jeez.
out to 20, yeah, and was conscious enough to tell and tested it at that number. And Leslie had to give me glucagon, which is basically,
That's the needle, right?
hormone. Yeah, I tell people it's instant marathon because it basically makes your liver dump all the extra sugar it has, which is usually what happens when people crack through the wall on a marathon. And it was awful. That was when we took our first rest day in Texas because that was just a mess. And had it not been for the oil field traffic, it would have been another 41-mile day and it wouldn't have been trouble. So I have to pay a lot of attention to that.
Yeah, that is a fascinating thing. Me personally, I don't really see a stress response in my levels, but that is fascinating to hear that stress changes your levels so drastically.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should mention it. I know you had mentioned earlier that you're type 1, and a lot of the type 1s that I have talked to have said, well, exercise makes my blood sugar drop. But people who are weightlifters and stuff like that, it often increases it. People who do, I guess, what I would call sort of long, slow cardio, so swimming for a couple of hours will make their blood sugar drop. But there's a point at which it can drain you enough that you start producing cortisol, your liver starts dumping glycogen into your bloodstream, and it can actually go up after going down. And I went and talked to my endocrinologist about that, and he said, "Well, that's really fascinating." And I was just like, "No, it's scary." I didn't expect that to happen. So some of these things you get out there, like when you did your hike, and you're an experiment of one, and you don't find out until you've been out there and made the mistakes, exactly what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. That is funny. The doctor's sitting there. Interesting, interesting. You're like, yeah, it's interesting for you, dude. Like, I was scared shitless at the time, though.
Yeah,
Oh, that's a
yeah. I was
fascinating
trying to
story,
avoid
sir.
using
And
that
you're like,
word, but that's what I was
fascinating.
thinking. Yeah, yeah. He's all Leonard Nimoy, and I'm more James T. Kirk.
All right. So, do we have any more questions in the chat before we sign off here, Andy? Nope. All right. Well, hey, Don, thank you for coming by. Well, virtually at least.
I've enjoyed it incredibly.
Yeah, so have I. And I hope if you're ever out near Disneyland again, come up to the Adventurers Club and meet some of the guys, and you'll be in good company here. Everybody appreciates your story, and this has just been fantastic.
I've enjoyed it. There's a good chance I may come by and visit you. The folks at Good Morning San Diego asked me to come back and tell them how the run went. So when I head down that direction, I'll make a stop in LA.
Great, for sure. We'll be glad to have you. All right, thank you all for watching. My name is Rich Mayfield, member 1211. We will see you next week from the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. Have a good week. Great.